All right. So here's how we're going to do this. Got it up on TikTok Live for the first time ever. So as you tune in, drop me a comment. Let me know that you're here. Let me know that you're tuning in. I'm excited to be bringing this all to you. So for TikTok, because it's the first time I have been able to be live on here. We just crossed 1,000 followers earlier this morning. I do the live videos as recordings of my podcast. So first off, as you tune in, I appreciate you being here. Go check out the podcast itself once you leave. Once you leave the live here today, go check out the podcast. Let me know what you think of that. The whole idea of the show is to reach athletes, to talk to athletes, to help athletes become the best version of themselves, to in turn help them reach higher and higher levels in sport. So as you tune in, I appreciate you being here. We're going to give it a minute before we get into the show. But today we're going to be talking about the mindset shift that athletes need in order to reach the next level. So let's get into it. It looks like TikTok is pretty active here. So I appreciate you guys all being here. If you are tuning in, make sure to drop me a comment. Let me know that you're here. Let me know that you are here and ready for the podcast. So we're going to get into the show talking about the mindset shift you need to reach the next level as an athlete. So let's get into the show in 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Elite Development Podcast, the show designed to help athletes gain an edge on their opponent and build their dream careers in sport. I'm your host, Kenny Dusseault, and today we are going to be talking about the mindset shift you need in order to reach the next level as an athlete. So before I get into what that mindset shift is, I just want to bring you guys to a mindset that I see in a lot of athletes that I work with and a lot of athletes that I talk to. So that mindset shift is that they really, or that mindset, sorry, is that they really want to reach the next level. They want to become a professional in their sport. They want to make millions of dollars as an athlete. They want all of these extremely high level things. Now, they really say that they want this. This is what they're training for. This is what they're going after. But all the time, what I see is that they have that mindset that they just want it so badly, but they're not willing to make sacrifices for it. You know, they want to be a professional athlete, but they're just too busy and they can't make it to training today. Or they have to work, or they have school, or, they've been working at it so long and nothing's happened yet. Or, oh, well, I've got things going on today, so I'll just get to training tomorrow. And there's so many of these mindset shifts that need to happen, because the truth is, if you want to be an athlete at the top level, you absolutely, without a doubt, need to be training that way. You need to be training like an athlete that's willing to make it to the top level. So if you're an athlete listening to this, I want you to think back to regular everyday life, and think back to the moments that you find yourself making excuses. Think back to the moments that you find yourself saying, oh, I would get there, I would train today, but I'm too busy. I've got, this, that, or the other thing that's going on today, so I can't make it. Or the moments that, you're picking going to hang out with your buddies over getting to that extra training session, or whatever else it might be. Think back to yourself on those moments that you're not prioritizing your training and you're prioritizing other things instead. And I understand it, because it's really easy when nobody is getting you in trouble for not showing up. If you don't show up to training, you're really only hurting yourself, right? So it's really easy to not show up when all you're doing is hurting yourself. Now, think about it in a different light. Look at, for example, when you were in school. When you're in school, if you're not showing up to class, I know when I was in high school, that meant a call to parents, and usually a call to parents saying that you didn't show up to class meant some sort of trouble at home. Can anybody relate to that? So if you didn't show up to class, you would get in trouble. If you don't show up to work, you get fired. If you don't show up to these things that have consequences, something bad happens. And if something bad happens, that makes you want to show up, even if it's not somewhere you enjoy being, right? So why do we show up to school and to the job we hate and to all of these other things when we can't find it in ourselves to show up to training every day, or to, properly prep our meals every week, or to do these other things that we know have to happen if we're going to succeed? Why can't we show up to that with the same energy? Why can't we show up to that the same as we show up to these non-negotiable commitments like school or work? And the reason is consequences. The reason is that if you don't show up to school, you get that call home to your parents, and in turn, you get in trouble or something happens to you. The same thing, if you don't show up for work, what happens? You don't get your paycheck. You miss out on money. You get fired. And if you get fired, what happens? You don't have the money to pay your bills. And then obviously worse and worse things happen from there. So that's the reason why it's so much easier to show up to something like work or school than it is to training, even though training is for something that we actually want. So the way I want to shift your mindset, if you're an athlete listening to this, then the way I want to shift your mindset is you've got to look at training the same way as you look at those non-negotiables like school or work. Because if you don't show up to school or you don't show up to work, bad things happen to you. And if you look at training with that same mentality, you look at training, even though there's no one there enforcing it, if you look at your sport like a career right now, even if it's not at that point for you yet, those are the athletes every time that are going to make it further in their sport. Because if you are able to operate as if this is your career right now you're going to be showing up the same way in that non-negotiable mindset, the same way as you do for work or the same way as you do for school. The more and more and more you can do that, the better and better position you're putting yourself in moving further down the road. Does that make sense? If you're listening to this live, drop me a comment. Let me know that makes sense. If you're listening to this back on the replay, just think back on that for a second. If you are able to treat your sport as a career right now, even if it's not at that point for you yet, this is immediately going to put yourself in a better headspace where training isn't a negotiable thing that you do when it fits your schedule. Training is something that is a mandatory part of your schedule. Because if it's a mandatory part of your schedule and you know that I have to be at training these days at these times, now you're getting every single one of those sessions in. You're not missing them. And if you're getting every session in, if you're not missing those sessions, now you're able to make more progress. And the more progress you make, the further along you get in your career. So the first thing to make that mindset shift that's really going to help you guys is just changing up your priorities. What I see a lot is people that, again, they want to be athletes really badly. They want to train. They want to do all these things. But then an opportunity to go hang out with their buddies comes up. And instead of coming to the training session, they're going to hang out with their buddies. Or, well, I can't make it to training today because, I got to get home to clean the house. And, these little things that on the surface make sense. Yes, you do need to clean your house. Yes, you have your buddy's birthday that you have to be at, whatever it might be. But if you're truly trying to become a professional athlete one day, that can't be where your priorities are. Your priorities have to be changed. You have to be willing to either sacrifice some of those things or clean your house after you get home from training. Get what I mean? So what I want you guys to do right away is think about shifting your priorities. Think to your life right now. Think to, how you spend your time and what's one priority you can shift in order to put more energy towards the athletic career that you're working on building. So in your life, what's one priority you can shift to put more energy towards the athletic career that you're building? For myself, from a business standpoint, as I've started building my business, one shift that I'm making is I quit drinking, because not that I ever had a major drinking problem, but that was something that was taking away from my life. And so as my vision in my business became more clear and I understood what I'm trying to grow into and who I'm trying to be as an entrepreneur, as a coach, as a business owner, as a leader, I understood that drinking was not serving that vision anymore. And so I was able to shift the priorities, make sure that I was cutting that out. So I was putting more energy towards serving my vision for the future. Now, what's difficult about this is that as you do it, as you shift your priorities, as you start making some sacrifices, some changes, instead, it's not going to pay off right away. You're not going to quit drinking and then immediately make yourself thousands more dollars every month. You're not going to, sacrifice that one thing you do during the week and immediately become a professional athlete. So that's where the long-term play really needs to come in. If you are a young athlete right now and you think of some of those changes you can make, some of those activities that you partake in that aren't serving your vision for the future, and something that you can cut out or at least cut down, it's going to be a long-term play. And I need you to understand that. I need you to understand that you're not going to stop drinking and immediately become a professional athlete. But the proof is in the pudding. If you do that and you're able to stick to it, now over time, every day you're a little bit healthier. Every day you're pushing forward a little bit more. Every day you've got more energy to put into your sport. And what happens when you've got more energy to put into your sport? What happens when you've got more energy to put into every training session that you do? You start to make more progress. And if you're making more progress, again, we've said it already, you're going to get further in the sport, right? So something that simple, making those sacrifices, shifting those priorities a little bit, are what really is the missing piece to a lot of people's mindsets on what is going to help take them to the next level. Instead of saying, I want this, and not changing anything or not making any sacrifices to get it, you need to be the one that's willing to make the sacrifice. You need to be the one that's willing to make the change. Because if you're the one who's willing to make the change, you're the one who's willing to live the lifestyle needed to reach that next level. So, as I mentioned, the real mindset shift I need you guys all to make is start viewing your sport as your career right now if you want it to be your career in the future. Treat it the same way. Treat it as if you not showing up for a training session meant that you were going to get fired. Treat it as if you not showing up for a training session meant you were going to get in trouble, meant you were going to lose something, meant there was going to be a real consequence. Because if you can treat it that way, it bumps it up the priority line. It bumps it up the priority scale. And if it bumps it up the priority scale, you're going to make more progress steadily over time. Now, I know a lot of people are probably listening to this. They're probably hearing this and saying, this sounds awful. Are you saying that I can never see my friends again? Or I can never, I can't live a life. I have to just, eat, breathe, and sleep and commit to my sport. And no, your entire life doesn't need to be your sport. You absolutely should still have social. You should absolutely still have other activities outside of the sport. And this is not going to take away from you being successful in it. But what I really want to get across is that what I'm really trying to say here is that the sport needs to be the priority if you want to do this for a living. Right? So this doesn't mean you need to sacrifice all your friends. This doesn't mean you need to sacrifice your entire social life. This doesn't mean that you need to quit your job so that you can only focus on training. But what this means is training needs to be higher on the list. So right now, if you work a really busy job that pays you well, can you live off of a little bit less money every month and a job that is going to take less of your physical energy and potentially less of your time? Because if you can do that, then now you can push forward in your sport more. You can make more progress, and in turn, you can climb further and further up that ladder. So it's just making little shifts like that. This doesn't mean you have to give up your social life, but instead of staying out till 4 o'clock in the morning and having 10 beers and being absolutely destroyed the entire next day, now get home by midnight. Get home by midnight, have a beer instead of 10, get a decent night's sleep, drink some water, and actually be ready to train the next day. Making those little sacrifices aren't sacrificing your whole social life. They're not making huge changes to your life. They're just making little sacrifices, making little changes that in the end are going to serve you to get further and further within your athletic career. And one final thing that I want to leave you guys with as I wrap up the show is that if you want to be great, you have to live that way. I hear so many people say that they want to be a professional athlete, but they don't want to make any of the sacrifices, or they don't want to make any of the changes that are required to compete at that level. So if you're an athlete right now listening to this and you say, I want to be a professional athlete, but I don't want to sacrifice my nights out getting drunk with the boys, or I don't want to sacrifice, eating shitty food and staying up all night playing video games every weekend, or I don't want to, make any of these other sacrifices, then I want you to ask yourself, how badly do you really want to be a professional athlete? Let's let that sit. How badly do you really want to be a professional athlete? Because if you really want to be a pro, if you really want to make it to the top, these are just non-negotiable things that you need to start doing. You need to start making these sacrifices. You need to put yourself in as good of a position as possible to continue to move up the ranks. So that is it. That is all. I hope you guys got some value from this episode. And if you did, make sure to leave a review for the podcast. If you're listening to this live, you can check it out at www.elitedevelopmentpodcast.ca, or you can find it on all the major podcast platforms. That's Apple Podcasts, that's Spotify, all of the ones. If you can find a podcast there, you can find this show. So you can check it out there. And then leave a review for the show, or shoot me a message on social media. Shoot me a message on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, any of those, and let me know what it was you took away from this episode or other episodes of the show as well. So that is it. That is all. I appreciate you all for tuning in live. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day.